Thank you very much, Pratiksha. Good evening from Manila. And now we're moving into our next keynote for this evening. And allow me to briefly introduce our next keynote speaker. Is Vaibhav Chabra, who is the founder and chief learning officer of a Maker's Asylum. And Vaibhav is a mechanical engineer by education, but a carpenter by passion. A graduate from Boston University, and he spent the first 2 years of his career at iNetra, startup from MIT Media Labs, building portable virtual reality-based eye diagnostic devices. So if you want to know more about Vaibhav, you can check on the website, the Futures Festival, wherein a more detailed description about his background is there. But Vaibhav will share with us his his view about the power of a collective, and it's pretty interesting to see here that the context is, of course, is about COVID-19, and it's just amazing to see that through the power of collective work, Vaibhav was able to work on and contribute, in resolving the oxygen problem of the country, which of course in India. And according to Vaibhav, in his description for his keynote, is that he went from knowing very little about oxygen concentrators to making them and improving designs to suit the local needs using locally available materials, and was able to activate around 150 organizations network to build oxygen concentrators locally. So without further ado, Vaibhav, good evening, and welcome to the Futures Festival. On to you.
Thank you so much, Shaman. Very nice to be here. Thank you, Pratiksha, for having me. Really been enjoying listening to the other speakers. It's been quite a beautiful evening, especially the views that Kshitij and Kiran and everyone had from before. So thanks once again for having me. So the plan is that I thought that I'll be sharing with you guys a little story of what we do back here in Goa now, India, and at the same time talk about what happened during the pandemic. So please allow me to share my screen. So we call this the M19 Initiative. I'll get to it a little bit later as to why it's called that and what happened exactly during COVID-19. But let me give you a little background. So we've been running this makerspace in now Goa, but originally in Mumbai for over 8 years, with a simple thought of making together. Because if you think about it, making is a lot of fun, but when you make together, it's so much more fun and so much more exciting, because you're able to collaborate with so many more people and learn their perspective and share in a more exciting way, whether it be simply making a table or anything else that you want to make. It's just so much more fun to do it together. And that's why Maker's Asylum started about 8 years back in Mumbai. And it housed everything from a woodworking lab to a metalworking workshop to a laser cutting section to a 3D printing lab to a lot of electronics. And this all started in 2013 when the ceiling of the office that I was working at, which was iNetra, which Sherman just talked about, the eye diagnostic company, fell down in Mumbai and led to an opportunity to build new tables. And that's when a bunch of community members or people from Facebook and Twitter and people who knew me sort of came together, and we got together and built 3 tables in a day. And it was quite fun because, I mean, it was quite an exciting day. We had a great time building tables and sharing a pizza. That's pretty much how Maker's Asylum started. Over 8 years, though, it's been a crazy story, because 8 years, we have moved 8 spaces. The first space was only about 200 odd square feet. And slowly, we kept growing in the size of space, but more importantly, the community of people that were coming to the space that kept making the space stronger and made it come back to life every time, even though secretly we were kicked out of each of the spaces before moving on to the next one. So a fun story over there for a different time. But That's where we are. And the last place that you see over here on the bottom right is where we are at the moment. That's in Goa, India, beach town Goa. So we got here just about last year because of the pandemic, because our space in Mumbai was quite large, and Mumbai is very expensive. However, there's a beautiful, over the years, Makers Asylum organically got to get known as a sort of an innovation hub in Mumbai, because a lot of artists, designers, people from all different backgrounds used to come to the space to be able to make whatever they wanted to make. It was sort of like a beautiful creative hub, and it is for people from very different backgrounds. People who have no background of engineering can also come, learn how to use the tools, and try out different things. People have made anything from making skateboards over here to making a full auto rickshaw over here, or electric bikes over here. So very, very different projects go on at the space, which is quite fun. Primarily what we do as far as Makers Asylum is concerned, in the backbone, we have two major programs. One of them is called SDG School, focused on the sustainable development goals that we've been running for many years now. And the other one is sort of a skill-based learning tools. And both these programs before the pandemic were all physical. So the space that you see in my background is actually Makers Asylum in Mumbai. And we had a large space, about 10,000 square feet, like I said, where people would come down from different parts of the world, and over the years build a lot of physical things. But then the pandemic happened and we had to shut down just like everyone else, right? The lockdown closed everything down. Nobody on the streets for over almost 5-6 months in India. So it was quite crazy. So how do you survive a business like that? And that's what one of our questions was, and we didn't know how to do it. So, but the first obvious choice when we heard there is a pandemic outside was to not go home and stay at the makerspace, because you have all the tools over there, right? And you can build pretty much anything. So that's what we did. A bunch of us packed up our bags and moved inside Makers Asylum, trying to figure out what are we going to do and how are we going to survive this pandemic. And then we started realizing how bad the situation was out there, especially with PPEs in the beginning. And I think some of you guys would remember that there was a huge shortage of PPEs across the world, because pretty much the entire world was importing PPEs from China. And that's what happened, because China was locked down. So there was no PPE coming in. And Mumbai, especially in India, there was, we never really made PPE before this. So we didn't know what we were doing. So we got to work. We stopped thinking, we started making. We were 4 of us inside the lab, and we decided we're going to make 10,000 face shields. This was like the second day of the lockdown. Now, this is the time when like Mumbai was dead, and Mumbai is like a hustling, bustling city, but there was not a single soul on the streets. And we, 4 people, decided that, hey, we're going to get together and make 10,000 face shields. It was a huge target for us, without any material, without any shops open, nothing. But we said, we'll do it. So we got to work. Day and night, we started making face shields and prototyping different designs. And what happened after that was super exciting. People started finding out. And within no time, there were over 20 people at the asylum, packed up their bags and moved in with us. And all these people now started living at the makerspace day and night, 24 hours a day, and were just making face shields, because the problem was so grave out there. There were ambulances, there were police vehicles parked outside Makers Asylum in line to pick up face shields. Can you imagine that? Like literally outside a makerspace, ambulances just trying to pick up as many face shields as they could. I think I have a photo of this, like ambulances filling up, police personnel filling up. It was crazy. So while we were doing this, we went through a lot of design iterations. So we went over 21 design iterations, and we got somewhere pretty exciting, because, all right, getting back to the story. So we went through a bunch of design iterations and figured out like this design that sort of worked. And a lot of the ethical committees of the hospital really liked it, and they were obviously getting it. So what we did immediately was, one, open source the design, share it with as many people as possible, and starting expanding, because the only way, because India is a large country, the only way you can do that, and I mean, with the makerspace philosophy of us, we were starting to share the design digitally so that other labs can start making them locally for their local ecosystems. And we started connecting them to hospitals and foundations so that they get everything they need to get going really quickly. And then what happened after that was super exciting. Over 42 cities, towns, and villages joined the force. And now we had pretty much all of India, east, west, north, south of India, making face shields. Labs everywhere active. Everywhere from BBC to Vogue magazine to NDTV, all the news channels were talking about it, which is pretty crazy. So more and more people started joining. And we went from 0 face shields to 1 million face shields in a matter of 49 days. To just put that into perspective, it took us 15 days to get to 100,000 face shields, and then 7 days after that to make the next 100,000. And then towards the end, as you can see, we were making about 100,000 face shields a day. And this is just a group of makerspaces. And what was really, really beautiful about that, and I think the last panel was also talking about it, it wasn't about one space, right? It wasn't about one organization. It was about this entire collective. And the most beautiful thing over there was that you can see that the yellow line over there was Makers Asylum in this graph that one of the community members made. And the others were the other labs sort of joining in with their contributions. So what you can see is that a bunch of them were actually faster and better than what we were doing, which was super exciting because it wasn't a one-way street anymore, right? When you start sharing, it's never a one-way street. You also start learning. So it was a two-way street where we were building together and coming up with ways on how we can make more face shields faster and to be able to give them to hospitals faster. We even got to the point where inside college campuses, especially inside the medical schools, there were a lot of medical students who were not doing anything. So they also started making face shields using the same designs for their hospitals right at the source. And that's how we were able to sort of together as a collective be able to contribute those kind of numbers. And just to put that into perspective, like I was talking about, pretty much every part of India was covered. So that meant that if a hospital needed a face shield in, let's say, Kashmir, there was a lab in Kashmir making them that was supporting them. If they were in Guwahati, there was a lab in Guwahati making them and supporting them, which was what was super exciting. And when I talk about these labs and these people were from all different backgrounds, a completely multidisciplinary group. These were like, some of them were makers, yes, but most of them were photographers, chefs, filmmakers, doctors who were off duty. I'm just looking at people right now and remembering their professions. There was psychologists, there was this people who were running their factories and people from all different backgrounds that were coming together. The youngest member of the M19 Collective was only 12 years old, and he made over 344 shields with his family at home in Gujarat. So it was a very diverse group of people that were coming together and supporting and making in whatever ways they could. And of course, we celebrated during this time over Zoom calls, just like this, and at the same time collaborated and contributed our learnings with each other over these Zoom calls really quickly to be able to move forward faster. This went on to become a very exciting case study by Cambridge University and OSMS. So you guys can read that over there. Cambridge University actually is publishing a couple more papers, but that's later. But anyways, right, there is a big one over there on this on the website. But what was very exciting was that the M19 Collective, because it became like so exciting that it wasn't about one lab, it was about multiple people getting together. A lot of other labs and together, we started other problems that were going on and other ideas. And we started working on those too. So we built everything from active respirators. Whoops. Am I stuck?
No, you're fine.
Okay, great. So we went on to build a bunch of really exciting projects like active respirators, which sort of had like a blower unit that provided filtered air directly to the doctors, or making the M19 rebreather, which was sort of like a handheld motorized air purifier for senior citizens. Okay. While this was happening in India, what happened in the world was even more exciting. So once the pandemic sort of calmed down a little bit and the first wave subsided, we got to know that every other part of the world, the maker movement did the same thing. The makers in their countries and cities did pretty much the same exact thing, which was super duper exciting. So this was a published study by OSMS, Open Source Medical Supplies. Sorry, everyone's frozen. Can you hear me?
Don't worry, I'll tell you if you're,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Okay, great. So that's perfect. So Open Source Medical Supplies published a study, which was super exciting. And we got to figure out that pretty much the maker spaces in every single country had a very, very similar response. So, I mean, I think there is something to say about the culture of maker spaces over there, because literally every maker thought the same, I guess, in different parts, and just got to work and started making face shields or whatever they could. And it was super exciting to find out about this later on. And just to put that in perspective, $271 million worth of medical supplies were made by just communities and citizens and maker spaces alone across the world. 48.3 million units. That's a lot of being produced by just citizens, which was quite exciting. The power of the collective, as we say. However, there was one problem. There was one problem around quality when it came to the QA QC. And this was a conversation that we started having a little later, because obviously when you were quickly transporting designs across the internet and sharing with other labs, not every part of the design had the same importance, right? So there was an issue of QA QC. How do you manage that in an open source ecosystem? That became a very interesting point of discussion, because when we talk about collaborators, there was nothing like this that sort of happened before, where so many people were making the same thing simultaneously, and these are just citizens, right, from all different age groups. So that's when the next problem came about, which was the second wave in India, where there was a huge issue around oxygen. And luckily, thanks to open source medical supplies, we were anyways researching and hearing about the oxygen problem, which could eventually hit India. So we were studying various open source oxygen concentrators for a while. So we were looking at different ones. Of course, there was the OxyKit, there was the Meru design, there was an Apollo design, and we were able to try to see, but there was one issue though, that none of the oxygen concentrators, the open source ones, were ready for certification. They were just about there, they were producing the right kind of oxygen, but there was an issue when it came to being medically ready, or in general, ready to be able to produce, rather. So that's when Anul and a bunch of others in Goa now, got together and we started working on oxygen concentrators. This was right about at the second wave. So again, all of us started moving back into Maker's Asylum and started working on oxygen concentrators. Initially, we looked at some of the open source designs like the OxyKit and others, and then slowly developed the M1902, which you can see on the right or at the bottom. The M1902 went through multiple prototypes over 8 weeks and were able to put this together. However, what was super exciting about this concentrator was that one, over 30 labs worked together to make this happen across the country. So it was simultaneous innovation going on, which was quite cool. Simultaneous problem solving going on, understanding from each other, trying to figure out how to make this using local supplies. Because what was happening with oxygen concentrators coming to India was that they were failing. And we found this out there was a doctor who had reached out to us, Dr. Lenny, and he literally got like 6 oxygen concentrators and dumped them at Maker's Asylum. And he said that, listen, there are so many oxygen concentrators coming from China or other parts of the world, but how do I repair them? Because nobody knows how to repair them. That was another conversation. And the other problem with oxygen concentrators happening at this point was that how do you tropicalize them? Because there was a huge problem with the humidity and the zeolites that actually work in the oxygen concentrators. So basically they were failing because the humidity levels in Goa and other parts of India was really high. So there was this entire debate and question around that. So while we were building them and sort of trying to tackle some of the problem statements around moisture and other things, other labs all across India also started doing that R&D and started making their own versions. This was when it got slightly exciting, because that's when the University of Cambridge then reached out to us, and this time officially got involved and funded the project, and started doing really deep analysis on the QA/QC and working out ways in which other labs could follow a certain path so that they're able to sort of manufacture any medical supplies, not just one oxygen concentrator in the future, by creating an open source ecosystem. So this was sort of an interesting conversation. It's still work in progress. We're still trying to build and learn, and at the same time, share what we do. The oxygen concentrator finally went in for certification, and now it's in Mumbai getting certified, the one that we're building. But the conversation about repairability of oxygen concentrators became super exciting to us as well. And that's when we, while the oxygen concentrator that we were building is gone for certification, we started repairing them, and we started hosting repair cafes for the local hospitals to come together to the local makerspaces and at the same time repair their oxygen concentrators. We repaired, I think, 7 last week in Goa, and today we had another oxygen repair camp in Pune, where Anul, I believe, had about 25 oxygen concentrators coming in from different parts of the country to Pune, locally from different parts of the hospitals in Pune, and they managed to repair quite a few. I don't know the exact number. I'll find that out tomorrow. But what's exciting is that now the community that was already building oxygen concentrators started also repairing them, because that was one more immediate need. Because thinking about it, when you save an oxygen concentrator from going into the landfill, you're actually, one, making it much more sustainable, but at the same time creating a way to sort of bring that back to life and continue to do its job. So we really believe in the repairability of these oxygen concentrators and in general all sorts of products. So that's what we've been up to, creating this community of open source medical supplies in a way, or open source devices, and sharing knowledge with other parts of and other makerspace across India so that we can make together. Thank you. That was pretty much it from my side. And apologies for the electricity problems in the middle. So I will be happy to take any questions if you have.
Thank you very much for a pretty amazing story about, it suddenly reminds me about the, that idea of that necessity is the mother of all innovation. And the thought that this is a good story, an amazing story about intentional innovation, and done collectively, not just by one particular company or a state-driven innovation that normally funded by the state in crisis and just pull in government resources. But this one is done collectively with an amazing network. So any questions, feedback, comments, feel free to put them in the chat, or you may open your mic if you would like to share your thoughts from feedback from Baba presentation. Yeah, there is a question here from Omar. Who funded the raw materials?
Who funded the raw materials? So it was quite interesting. So from right at the beginning, we realized that oops.
Yep, someone is speaking. Can we mute her? Or there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. So initially what we did is that initial bit of funding came from a crowdfunding campaign that we put out, and each lab was running their own sort of funding campaign to get some initial funds, because we weren't really applying or talking to a lot of people at that time because we were focused on building. But one thing that we did right at the beginning was try and figure out the cost for making a unit. and put that inside the crowdfunding campaign itself. We said that, okay, it costs us about 55 rupees at that time. So 55 rupees is about 75 cents to make a facial using a laser cutter, including the raw materials. So that is for every bit of money that we're collecting, we're going to be donating X number of facials divided by 55, basically, whatever the total amount we collected.